Hello, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, just welcome. This is my channel's Quinn's Quintessential Reads, and this is going to be the TBR that I have for the rest of the year. So I don't have the game this round, because my life was a little crazy. I was in a reading slump, and I didn't really feel like rearranging my room to film the game, because I'd wanted to try to film it with my camera on my laptop instead of my phone because I wasn't overly happy with my phone's camera the last time, but that would have required rearranging the room entirely, and I wasn't feeling up to it then because, as I said in my previous video, my life is always a mess. So I did play the game to get the books, and it's just not filmed, but I promise in January we'll be back to the game when I play that game, when I create a new TBR again. It was the reason it ended up being a TBR for the rest of the year is because the game was not nice to me. There were 11 books, and that's way more than I can read in a month, based on how many I normally read in a month. That's going to take me the rest of the year unless like I really get lucky and just fly through all of these books, but probably not going to happen. But before we get into this list, I do owe anyone who has watched my previous video an apology. I said there was going to be a July wrap-up video, and there was not. I ended up going to the movies with my mom the day I was intending to film that because the movie was going to be leaving theaters soon, and then it just felt too late to film the video. I know this video is very late for for the season. I live on a third floor in an old house, and the temperature rose back to 90 in early September, and there's just no way you'd be able to hear me over my air conditioner, and there's no way I'd be able to film the video in time before like all the cold air from the air conditioner just evaporated. It would be way too hot. So it took a few weeks for the apartment to cool down, and that's why we're, that's what caused the delay. I did decide that I'm just going to combine August and September wrap-up, so I will still go over the books that I read in August, and that should have had its own wrap-up video. I'll just combine that with September's. Also, again, that was just because of the weather and the temperature. And anyway, it doesn't matter. It actually probably works out for the best because August was a horrible reading month for me. I was in a deep, deep slump, so it won't, probably wouldn't have been the cheeriest of videos anyway, so now it'll be a little better because September has been much better. So with all that said, let's get into the video. My one rule, since I was in such a deep slump for the game, was to pick books that I was excited to read. I actually broke that rule with the first roll that I landed on, which was like suspense, mystery, thriller. I love that genre, and it's really good for slumps, but rarely do I ever have one that I'm like dying, do I have a book from that genre that I'm like dying to read? So instead I kind of twisted my own rule and just chose like a safety net. So I ended up choosing Pretend You Don't See Her by Mary Higgins Clark. I've read from this author before, and although I certainly haven't loved every single book she's written, I've always enjoyed myself, so I figured this would be a safe bet. Okay, and the premise for this one is our main character, her name is Lacey, is witness to a murder, and the murder victim, in her final words, gives her a journal of her deceased daughter saying she believes this is why she was killed. Our main character gives this to the police, but that puts her life in danger. She ends up in witness protection program. And then it seems like the killer finds her, in her new home, in her new area, in her new life. So, typical murder mystery. It seems like it will be very suspenseful, and I trust this author to give me a good time. My next pick was just a free pick, and by the way, they're not necessarily in order of the way I rolled. That one actually I did roll first, but it's the size of the books random, so I didn't want it to fall by putting like a huge book on top of a small one. So not necessarily going in order of my roles here. But this was a free pick, and I just wanted to continue this series. I started rereading this series. I never finished the entire series, so this isn't a reread, but I revisited this series starting in January, and I haven't picked up one of them since like April or May, because I'm just not loving my time. I want to say, like, I do like the series. I think it's clever. I just think I missed my window for reading it, which is okay. That happens. But I wanted to continue because I'm not quite ready to put it down permanently. I'm kind of hoping it'll pick up and get better. So if you are familiar with this series, if you're not familiar with the series, it's basically about these three orphans whose parents died, and they left an inheritance for them, but they can't access the inheritance until the oldest child is of legal age, which I believe is still 18. It's kind of like real world fantasy. I don't know. It's kind of like a weird setting. But they're basically on the run from Count Olaf, who's the main villain of this series, who is after their fortune. And basically that's the premise. Like, he's always chasing them down and forcing them to move. So I wanted to continue on with the series because I wasn't quite ready to permanently DNF it, and I needed to pick it back up. So that was the next one. Okay, in my next book I actually got a prompt, and that was for a divisive book. So on this prompt, divisive book. But what my thoughts were and what the internet's thought were divisive were two different things, which is where I got the prompt. So when I was looking up books, because I wasn't sure off the top of my head what books I had that would be considered divisive, the internet was clearly thinking of like banned books or like controversial books. Well, I was thinking books or authors that people like tend to love or hate. And I didn't have any. I did look to see like what the internet's version of divisive book was, and I didn't really have any anyway, so I just decided to go with my interpretation of that prompt. And I know for Sarah J. Maas, people seem to either love or hate her, and actually this is like kind of a second chance for this author for me too. But I'm reading Court of Thorns and Roses, and I think a lot of people have read this book, so I'm sure many of you already know what the premise is, but basically, our main character ends up, being held captive by a high fae, and it's basically like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I can't really think of any other way to explain it without spoiling things, because I'm actually reading this now. But yeah, second chance for the author, and it filled the prompt, and I will say, spoiler alert, I am liking it, so, yay. And the next prompt I had was a fantasy prompt, so I kind of cheated on my own rules a little bit. I try not to pick up series unless I specifically pull the prompt series, strictly to, make sure I'm not, like, in the middle of, like, a huge amount of series, and I'm already in the middle of more than I would like, but I just wasn't feeling it for the books that I have on my shelf for fantasy, so I decided to break that rule because I really was feeling slumpy and I just wanted books that I was excited for, and this has been on my TBR shelf for years. So I picked up A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And, we're basically following our main character, Diana Bishop, who is, a professor, and she's, working on a project, and she ends up pulling this manuscript that supposedly went missing years ago, and no one is able to claim it except for some reason her. And she actually is not very adept at her magic. She's kind of stays away from her world because she is a witch. That's not a spoiler. It's said, but basically, because she ends up pulling this manuscript, she draws the attention of both other witches, demons, and vampires in this world, and she particularly one vampire who she forms an alliance with. And I don't know, it just seemed like something that was up my alley. So I was happy to get it finally on my TBR. Okay, this one was also on a mystery, suspense, and thriller, I Am Her Revenge by Meredith Moore. I'm not 100%, I'm not really too sure what this one's about. It seems like our main character is being used as a tool by her mother to get revenge for something that happened to the mother. That's really all I'm getting based on the synopsis, which is totally fine because, you know, when it comes to mystery, suspense, and thriller, like the less you know going and, you know, the better the story is. But I just thought this sounded intriguing. It's been on my shelf for a year or two, so I decided now is the time to take a chance. I also got a nonfiction prompt, so which was The American Plague, which has been on my TBR shelf for an embarrassingly long time, like maybe over a decade. So I decided it was finally time to read this book, but it's about the yellow fever epidemic that you know, that plagued our you know, the United States. So should be interesting. I'm just looking forward to finally getting it off my shelf, and I really hope I enjoy it. Okay, so the next spot was a contemporary literary fiction spot, so I went with Sharkheart by Emily Habit, I believe the author's name is. This was a book of the month pick, and honestly, I couldn't even tell you what about it. The premise of it is basically that this couple just got married, and then the husband gets diagnosed with some disease, which is going to turn him into a great white shark. My favorite shark, by the way. And I don't know, it just sounded so unhinged that I absolutely had to pick it up to see what it, just to see what it, so to see what it is. Spoiler alert, because I read this already. Loved it. Spoiler alert for the wrap-up video. Okay, the next book was also a prompt. It was a person on the cover. And I know the cat is the focal point, but there is still a person on this cover, so I maybe cheated a little bit, but I think it counts. You know, my channel marbles. And I chose to go with Frankie and Amelia by Cami McGovern. And it seems to be about, it actually seems based on the synopsis that it's going to be from the cat's point of view, but he was like a feral cat or a stray cat, and he ends up in the care, you know, of this young girl who has trouble fitting in with school, so it seems like it's going to be a story where they both really help each other heal. And I'm hoping it's just going to be sweet and heartwarming. I'm terrified that it's going to be heartbreaking. I don't trust it when there are animals involved in stories. It's actually one of my frowny face prompts is if there's an animal in a story. So I might be setting myself up for heartbreak here, but I'm hoping it will be heartwarming. And I'm looking forward to reading it. My next book was also a prompt for a book over 1,000 pages, but this was the last prompt that I wanted to get when I was playing my TBR game, because I was in a deep slump, so the last thing I wanted was to get a book that was 1,000 pages or more. But it's okay, because I've been loving this series, and I need to read this one in the 4th book before fall of next year anyway, before the 5th one comes out. I think that's when the 5th book is supposed to come out in the Stormlight Archive series, but I do plan on reading this book in December, because I never have time to read in December, really. Because of the holidays, it's just too busy. So I'm just going to focus on this one, Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. It's the 3rd book of the Stormlight Archive series. No, I can't tell you what it's about. I am not intelligent enough to be able to describe this series, but I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, hopefully I won't be in a slump in December, so that I can actually take this on. Oh boy, my pile's gonna topple. That's why I didn't pile it that way. And then my next final two books that on the list are actually count as comic book or graphic novel. I landed on that prompt, and you know, I was in a slump and I didn't feel like going through all my boxes. He's like, died on a theme, and I wanted spooky because I was hoping to read them for October. So with going with Two Moons, Volume 1 of the Iron Noose, and I have no idea what it's about at all. It looks like middle of the horrors of the American Civil War, a young soldier. I don't even know. It looks like it's about a soldier who is visited by ghosts and visions. I have no idea, but I am looking forward to finding out. It does look like it's going to be creepy, and I think this is what I'm going to pick up next to read. And the other one I'm going with is, you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Probably no explanation is needed there. I think it's just like a graphic novel, like, of her tales. I don't know if it follows the show exactly, or if it'll just be like additional stories, but I'm very much looking forward to this, and this is another one that I definitely want to read for October. So that's it. Those are the 11 books that are on my TBR. I will have a wrap-up video for each month still. For September, it's going to be a combo of August and September books. But I will still have one for October and November. And then in December, you know, I know, but there just won't be like a TBR video for those months, just because of how many there are. And I can't trust that I won't end up in another slump. I'm usually slumpy this time of the year, and if I'm not slumpy, I'm too busy anyway. But there will still be a wrap-up video. I'm hoping to have the August and September one up this weekend. But if not this weekend, it'll definitely be sometime next week. So definitely expect a video in a week. I promise it will be out. I don't care what I have to do to make myself get that video out. There'll be the wrap-up video, which I'm actually looking forward to, especially after September reads. And, you know, if I'm having really good reading months, you might end up with a surprise book. That wasn't on this list because I had time. But anyway, there we go. Very mixed book. I probably should have themed it a little bit more towards fall, because I watch a lot of you know, booktube videos, and everyone's talking about their fall books, and I'm like, I have some on here that I totally feel more summer. But you know, I'm a mood reader, and my moods don't always correspond necessarily with what season we are in. But there's a few good ones on here, I think, for this season. But I don't know, maybe that could be a video I could do next year. I kind of think about good fall read suggestions, even though I probably won't listen to my own suggestions. But anyway, yeah, that's the video. You know, thank you for sticking around. Hopefully you'll continue to want to stick around, and if that's the case, I'll see you in the wrap-up video. All right, bye-bye.